Hello, my name is Nadine and welcome to Hop Along Studio. So today is Blue Monday, and Blue Monday can bring different emotions to different people. Some people see it as the acknowledgement of mental health. Other people see it as trivializing mental health issues. Some people believe it's a myth, and some people are really affected by Blue Monday, and it can affect how they kind of view their entire day. So my thoughts on Blue Monday was that I was going to come up with the art journaling page. I had a really great idea on like how I want to express how I feel about Blue Monday. I do have moments of sadness, and how do we find ways to move past these feelings of blue to finding room for joy? How do we acknowledge that we have moments of sadness, and how do we move on from there? On my website earlier this week, I actually wrote about Blue Monday and my thoughts on how can we combat these feelings of sadness, and how can we make it an acknowledgement of feelings but not have those feelings control us or make us feel like we're victims to our circumstances. So to start with, I have my distress sprayer. I want to spritz the page lightly with a little bit of water. I also have these distress oxide sprays. I'm going to use a little bit and just spritz. I'm trying to create a oceany style background. So I just use peacock feathers, and this is Mermaid Lagoon. And this looks good so far. I do want to add a little bit more water. But as well too, I want this to run a little bit more than it is right now. So I'm actually using some golden high flow acrylics. This is a very highly pigmented acrylic medium. And I can also use a little bit of teal paint as well too. And so I'm hoping I can get this to run a little bit more and add some interesting kind of oceany look to this page. Sometimes this means tilting my book a little bit. I do know I use a lot of water on these projects. It does take them longer to dry, but I also find that sometimes it gives me the feel and the look that I'm hoping to get from these. So I'm going to leave this to dry for a little bit. So as that background dries, I'm going to start working on some of the focal images for this art journaling page. So I have a set of Local King rubber stamps with an ocean theme, some Ranger glossy cardstock, and a bunch of my dual tip Tombow markers. And I also have my dual brush pen color tracker. I find that sometimes the pen caps versus the actual colors vary a little bit. So I've actually colored in all of the colors that I do have so I can see how it's going to look on my stamp. This particular stamp, you're not doing the outline, you're actually coloring in most of the detail on the stamp. So this is where these Tombow dual brush markers really have their place. So I'm actually going to use the markers to color in the highlights and the details and add some dark places and light places to add a little bit more interest to the stamp. So I'm doing the yellow highlights along the fins, at the top of the shell, a few highlights on the face where I think they will be. I'm then following up with my light green. Then my sap green, which is always a fantastic color. I like sap green both in my art, my painting art, and this type of thing. And lastly, I'm following up with some hunter green to get the edges of the shell. I think I covered up a little too much of my yellow, so I'm going to add a little bit more in a couple spots just to lighten it up a little bit. Blend some colors a little bit more. Then you want to huff on your stamp to reactivate the ink. And then press down nice and hard to get a really strong image. Then I'm going to move on to my small turtle. which will follow very similar regarding highlights. Another really great image. Again, you can get those really neat color variations by letting the markers overlap onto each other as you color. Now I'm using light orange, carmine, a little bit of orange. I'm going to do that mid-mix in there because I have a really dark color with a fairly light color, so following up some crimson. Breathe on it a little bit. There you go, another really great image. And this is a stamp. This stamp I'm going to actually color in, but for the meantime, I am going to use a Tombow N15 black marker just to give it a quick color just on the edges so that I can stamp it and then use other Tombows to fill on in. And lastly, I have my little stars that I want to fill in as well. I'm starting with blush, following up with some purple, there you go, some sea stars. The next step is to actually color in this little jar image. I think it's absolutely adorable. And I really like what you can do with these stamps and some of the interesting things that you can accomplish. So I'm actually going to use the blush color and just color in my image. And I'm using the periwinkle for the shell. Use a little bit of the blush to highlight it in spots. Then I'm going to use this N65 gray to actually do a little bit of outlining on this jar. And this is supposed to be sand in the bottom of the jar, so I'm going to do this yellow. And then I'm going to finish with this glacier blue. There you go. You have your little jar image all colored in. So I wanted to show you how to create these images. Now the last thing you're going to need to do is actually cut around each of the individual images so that you have they have nice borders and they actually look good and you're able to just use them straight in your project. I actually have created multiple versions of this and you're going to probably need multiple ones to complete this project. So make the images that you need and then we'll move on to the next step. So once the background's dried, you want to take all of the images that you've cut out and test fit them on your page, see if you like how they look and if you're happy with your layout. Once you are, then you can move on to the next step, which for me is to actually put in some medium to make it look like a sand bottom on the ocean and go from there. So the next step of this project is to make my paste sand. So I found this glitter snow, which is basically some sort of paste that has glitter in it, and I wanted to use it as a base for my sand. So I'm just taking a bit of it with a palette knife onto a palette. Then I have some golden fluid acrylic iridescent bronze. You want to make sure you shake it because it actually will settle to the bottom. So the key with paste is not to overdo the amount of paint that you put in. A little goes a long way, and you can actually distort the texture of the paste enough that you may not really be happy with the results you get. So I'm going to start. I add just a little bit of paint, and I'm mixing it so it gives it more of that kind of browny bronze color. It's not super dark, and the thing you need to understand with paste is with color you see is very similar to what's going to dry in. So you need to make sure you're happy with it before you start putting it down. I also have some golden Artist Colors iridescent gold, so I'm going to add a little bit of that as well, just to try to add a little bit more interesting color, give it more that warm glow over kind of a dark sandy look. And I'm not perfectly mixing it, so there's a little bit of difference in it. So I'm just going to start applying it to my page. Kind of want it to curve up like so to make it look like the ocean floor. And the ocean floor isn't always perfectly level, so neither is my horizon on this project. So I usually start by just adding a little bit on. And the key with this is to make sure you don't use a really large palette knife. The larger the palette knife, the harder this is to control. Being a small project, you want to use a small knife. And I wanted to embed this little jar into the sand, like it's actually sticking out of the sand in the bottom of the ocean, and someone dropped it in the ocean, and now things have decided to live in it. So I'm going to press it in because the paste will actually dry around it and hold it in. So add some paste on top so it looks like it's peeking out of the surface. And there we go. And I don't want to have a perfect line along the top here. I want it to be a little bit uneven. There's no point leaving any paste on my palette when I can just add a little bit more thickness to this and make it a little bit more interesting. And because I don't want to look completely uniform in color, I'm going to add just a tiny bit of gold to the edge of my palette knife, and I'm going to swirl it in. So there's going to be areas that are going to be more brown, and there's going to be areas that have a little bit more of the gold tinge. The cool thing about this medium is actually you're going to see the sparkle come through as this dries. So it's not going to be just brown. You're actually going to see a little bit of glitter through it as well. So now that I have put my paste in, I want to add all of my little starfish. And the cool thing about the starfish is you don't actually need to paste, you don't have to glue them in. The paste will actually hold them in place and will prevent them from falling off. So I'm basically using another palette knife just to squish it in. Now I will leave this to dry. It should take maybe an hour or two to dry, and then I will come back and finish this up. So now our medium's dried, and I wanted to try to bring this a bit closer to the camera so you could try to see all the glitter and interest that you have. It's a little bit of this rough textured surface. You have the little starfish in it, and as well you have a little bit of the gold, and you can see that little bit of shimmer and glitter from the paste. The next step is to add some distress ink to this background to add a little bit more interest. I am using a word stencil to be able to add some of the distress ink to be able to have a little bit more interest to this background. So I'm starting with Mermaid Lagoon. And again, I'm not doing it the whole thing from beginning to end, but just using parts of it, because again, you don't want to have too many stark lines when you're doing this. And I only want it in a few little places, some in behind where the seahorses are going to be, and some up in the more neutral spots where there's not going to be as much writing. Now I'm going to use two different distress blending tools to add the ink. Working with Picket Fence, which is a white. I don't want to mix it too much with the peacock feathers, so I'm going to try to put that down first. My sponge does look dirty, but actually every time I use them I do clean them, so it's not actually going to cause any issues with the color. So there you can see we have a little bit of writing that's a little bit darker. We have some lighter bubbles. We have some of that show the white over top of some of these dark areas. Again, trying to bring colors in and pull them out again in a way that draws the eye and adds some interest. So our next step is to actually lay out our embellishments that we want to add onto this page. So I have my sea turtles and my seahorses, but I do want to add the text, "I'm feeling blue," because being Blue Monday, I like the idea of talking about feeling blue in the way that being blue can be very sad and depressing, but it can also be a place of happiness, like the ocean when you're off scuba diving or snorkeling. So I wanted to have both aspects to this page. So now I've actually removed most of my embellishments except the ones at the top, because that's kind of where I wanted to make sure that my writing doesn't go above. I wanted to put down "I'm feeling blue" as my journaling for this page. So I'm actually going to use my gel pens to put blue on backwards to make sure that my E ends up at the place in the page that I want. So I am using a Sakura Jelly Roll pen through a stencil to get my letters in. So after you finish using the stencil to put your word blue on the page, you want to outline it with a Sakura Jelly Roll black pen. So after you have put the word blue down and outlined it, I want to then add the rest of my sentiment, which is "I'm feeling." And so I'm going to use my ruler just so that I can line everything up and make sure the spacing is where I want it to be. At this point, I'm only putting the top part in, and then once I move this, as it is, I'm going to start adding some additional thickness to this so it has a bit more flow to it. So I'm having a little bit of trouble with my gel pen on this watercolor surface, so I'm going to move to a Sakura Pigma brush pen and see if I can get a little bit more better result. express your feelings in, you want to put the word I'm, and I'm going to do this in a slightly different text. And not everyone is comfortable doing their own lettering in their journal, so you can always use stamps or something else or stickers to put this in. But I'm really working on my lettering skills, so I decided that I would do my own writing in here. So the last thing we need to do is actually put the rest of our embellishments and our little sea turtles and everything onto the page and paste them down. So to glue this down, I'm going to be using my Zot's adhesive and my tape runner. So I wanted to add one more thing before I finish this project, and it's the questions, am I hungry, am I angry, am I lonely, or am I tired? And that might seem like a strange thing to add to the journaling, but I did write an article earlier this week on my website about those ideas, about when is it that you're actually feeling depressed, and when is it things around you, or maybe not having enough food, not having enough sleep is affecting how you're feeling. And instead of beating yourself up on the fact that you are feeling that way, the question is it something in your environment that's causing this? And so it's taking that time to think and figure out, like, why am I feeling a certain way? And is there something I can do about it? I can't tell you how many times that I've had moments of just sadness where I have just gone to bed early because I'm just like, you know what? I am not in the frame of mind to deal with things well. And instead of making myself and everyone around me upset or miserable, instead I'm going to bed. I will deal with it tomorrow. And so I really like this idea of HALT. Am I hungry, angry, lonely, or tired? And it allows me to kind of slow down and figure out why I'm reacting the way I am. And if my reaction is measured, or is it something that I need to adjust my thinking for? I hope that you have found this inspiring. If you have, if you could like this video, subscribe to my channel, and provide a comment below, I'd really appreciate it. If there's a technique that you would like to see, or if you have questions on this video, please feel free to add them below. I'll get back to you as soon as possible. I hope that you have a great Blue Monday, a great week, and I will talk with you next time.